and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got that great show going for you with my co-host, Hawkeye Two Feathers, David Null. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
You can hear that dog in the background.
Howling in the background. So, greetings and blessings, as always, to you all. And we thank you for showing up. And we hope that you all are doing as well as possible in this day and age. Thank you, Robert, for having me back.
Oh, yeah. Good to be back. We were off last week because of the cold weather. Had to work late. Oh, I tell you. Whew. And it's better to be here than it is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do like Witchy Moon says. She says, don't forget to hit the like button. Yes, people, let's keep up the algorithm and hit the like button. Thank you very much. Yep. Lucky Stone's in the house. Chloe's in the house. She says the coyotes are howling. We got Nina the Mystic is in the house too. She says, greetings, everyone. And Chris Smith, hello. Thank you for all of you for joining us tonight, and I hope there's a whole bunch more. Everybody's coming on little by little, but there we go. We'll get there sooner or later. And there's Scotty Boy. Hot damn. And Crystal Shaman, thank you for coming along with us on the ride tonight, because we're going to finish up this book here, 9 Years Among the Indians. As you all know, it's been a wild ride, and now we're gonna finish it up because he's been kind of coerced into giving up that Indian lifestyle. You know, he was out there on the plains for so long, and little by little, well, you know, he's getting older, and they're trying to civilize him because he's going to be moving into, you know, new times and new ages, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So
I'm sure as he got older,
we're reading,
getting on and off that horse without a saddle, you know, getting shot at by all means of things, you know, would kind of sort of change his mind after a few years. You know, I would. Being old myself, you know, sometimes you just go, I can't do that no more, or that's not fun anymore. You know, you fell off your horse again. I know it ain't no fun no more.
I know. But he doesn't say about that. You know, he wanted to go back. He didn't want to come to society, really. You know, so let's do a little recap of all this. 9 years. Herman Lehman, he was captured in 1870. You know, he was a German immigrant with his family. His father had died when he was 5, and his mother remarried another guy. Because back in the day, you know, you didn't want to be an old widow, especially with kids. You needed a man to support you and to take care of you. And so, you know, women would hook up with pretty much anybody at that point, I guess. Anyway, so they moved out west. They're in Texas. The Indians attacked, and it was the Apaches. And they, you know, would scarf up little children and make them Apaches in their tribe, you know, because I think in reality that they didn't know, or they knew they couldn't keep their membership up. You know what I'm saying? The white man comes in like the wind, and they're like as many as the leaves on the trees or blades of grass on the ground, but they couldn't compete with that numbers wise. So their idea was to replace their ranks by capturing small children, Mexican children, white children, Indian children, whatever children they could, and make them their own. You know what I'm saying? So that's what they did. And Elderberry's in the house. Thank you for coming along for the ride.
Let me add this.
Yes.
Since you paused for a second. Hey, Barry. They also needed workers. So if they'd been
Yeah.
out on the raid four of their, native folks have been killed or wounded, that was four people that didn't do work, of whatever kind it was, and so everybody is necessary in that kind of a setting, you know,
Yes.
because everybody's got a little something to do, but it all adds up to the big picture. So, when your ranks go down, it wasn't just to like, oh, we're going to have these kids grow up. No, they needed helpers.
Yep, they did. And in the beginning, that's what he did. They made him watch the horses. They made him do all the grunt work. Basically, he was a little slave to the chief, whoever owned him, basically. He was his little slave. And that's what he did. Even in hunting and war, whatever it was, he was his, helper guy. And when the chief that owned him basically died, he was to avenge his death, and he did. But even knowing that, he wouldn't be accepted back into the tribe, and he also, he was lost at that point. He only knew the Indian ways. So it was rough for him. I mean, and I could see how rough it would be. Anyway, then it moves on. He learned how to fight. He learned how to shoot a bow. He learned how to make a bow. He learned how to ride horses. And again, they threw him on a horse, and he fell off. They threw him on again, and he tied him on, raced horses, and bet on him against other Indian tribes people, and because he was basically because we caught him, and he's not a true Apache. We're going to throw him on that wild horse, and if he gets killed, oh well. I mean, it's kind of a reckless way of life, but in the big picture, the Apaches didn't want to do it. Here, I'm not getting on that horse and getting killed. Put that kid on. I guess it made him a better rider, better at things. He didn't want to do things at first, but I guess his spirit, got the best of him.
And also, too, there were folks that the grown-ups were sitting around going, I wonder what that little white kid will do, Yeah, I know. Why don't you throw him in the pile and see if he can do it? Well, I don't know. We should waste our time. And next thing you know, they done shoved this little kid out there on a horse. Mm-hmm. Because some of them go, I just want to see what happens. I bet you this is going to be funny. Time on that of Appaloosa over there. But to the point, they really did that sort of thing.
They did. Here, we need somebody to go up and, into the white man's camp and steal their horses. You go up there. You do that. We'll watch you. Make sure you do it good. We'll protect you from back here. Anyway.
And if you get caught, you're already white, so
And that's true. And we'll bring up that one story where the Rangers, which were the most feared over the cavalry, the Indians feared the Rangers more than anything. And even after they were fighting the Rangers and the Rangers overtook them, one of the Rangers was going to kill him and realized he's a white boy and spared his life. And that's pretty much the only reason that he survived that fight, was that if he would have been an Indian, they would have killed him right then and there, scalped him, he'd have been dead. But they left him and said, "Hey, he's a white man. Okay, next." And then he ran off, and he hid and ran off after he looked for him, but still, if he would have been an Indian, he would have been dead.
Oh, listen, what's worse than being chased by the Rangers? Having a Jesuit priest give you a blanket.
That's a good one. Oh, that's a good one.
There. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, we learn. He had to learn how to eat like an Indian. What what their customs and things were. And then when it was all said and done, and he lost his tribe, basically, he went over to the Comanche and became a Comanche, and they adopted him into the tribe. And luckily, he met somebody who could speak Apache to bring him into the tribe. And said, "Hey, I know that kid. We raced horses with him. He's okay. Let's bring him on in." He's got a good story, and he told me what happened, and because he could interpret the language. So, I think if he didn't meet that guy that could interpret the language, I think things would have been a little bit different in the goings on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But we talked about a lot about that, and he lucked out that way. Luckily he did.
So what made him valuable is now he knows English some, right?
Yep. No. Now in his older years.
Yeah. Oh, he didn't know anything in his younger?
No. And when he moved to Texas, they were German-speaking immigrants. And,
so he had German instead of English.
Yes. And then he learned Apache, and then he learned Comanche. And now in this end of the book here we're going through, he's going to relearn English and stuff like that. So he's making the rounds. And like I said, even into his old age, he remained an Indian. And he's kind of famous. His brother and him were captured, and his brother escaped. His brother Willie. He lived out on the plains, didn't understand a lot of things, but was taught the Indian ways. And he even in his older years, he was meeting with these older men here were rangers that he had fought against or was captured by at some point in time. Isn't it amazing how you're fighting these guys and trying to scalp them at one point, and then later on in life, you're out there shaking hands with them, dressed in suits and meeting over dinner, smoking a cigar. Crazy, huh?
Yep.
He lived a good long life. I mean, born in 1859, died in 1932. He's seen it all, and we're going to talk a little bit about that by the end of this book. So as we get along here, we're going to keep moving. I know I went through a lot of this stuff before, but we're just going to flash through. So bring you up to, they keep partnering him with Quanah Parker, but most of his stay was spent with the Apaches. Quanah was the guy who convinced him basically to come in, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Let's see, where are we? Some of the Rangers, this is what it was like back in a camp, Ranger camp in McCavitt, Texas in 1876. And this would have been, table, a cookie, and, you think of, the Cowboys would have had all those big old cowboy hats, but you only see one kid here with the big old cowboy hat. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
This is, it kind of makes you wonder. They got the big old 6-shooters and Bowie knives.
Well, if the Rangers learned that if they had to go through a bunch of scrub brush, the taller hat would just get knocked off all the time.
Yeah.
And so they went with the shorter one just because, it wouldn't get knocked off all the time.
Pretty much.
I mean, those folks that were out west on the prairies, them big tall hats was sort of like an attic. It kept that sun from beating right on your head, So that 10-gallon hat, but them 10-gallon hats didn't work too well in the underbrush.
Yep. Yeah, there have been a few of these, even when these guys got older. Here you're talking about the Rangers. Some of the Rangers, as they were older, they still wore shorter, smaller hats. Here's one guy. The big brimmed hat is kind of a modern day thing. Like that. They were more derby like hats.
Yep.
We'll get into the hat thing one of these days from now, but and he got to meet the Texas Rangers years later. And it's kind of cool, that he got to do these things. He was mentioned in other books, 6 years with the Texas Rangers, and some of the fights and stuff. It was him. They were talking about him fighting. I don't know. I don't remember which is. This is the guy from the book. And here's Texas. I got some maps of Texas tonight, from back in the day. And as you can see, Texas back in the day didn't even have the counties yet. So just getting established, just rivers. I know we were going to look for the Pecos River somewhere here and Fort Sill and some of these other ones. Red River. Here's the Red River. If you're in Texas, you probably know more about the rivers than I do. Here, the Rio something something Red River. This is the Red River. Rio something something River. Here's Austin. This is somewhere in there, but anyway. I don't know if you guys can see all this, but I'm making it as big as I possibly can. Anyway, the point is we're talking about Texas. Texas. This is kind of New Mexico, yeah, New Mexico. And Texas. Yeah, that one didn't come out good. Juana Parker. I got some new ones of. Nope, this is the one I want. Looky there. The Republic of Texas. This is a map of 1836, what it would have looked like. Look they got the wagons going. And look out here, there's Buffalo here. There's mountains over here. You imagine getting a map and you got to read this map and go, well, there's our map. Let's go for there's just nothing in here. So you can see the horses. There's the Indians. Well, look at this. Here's a bunch of teepees. You big Indian tribe don't go there. You'll get scalped. The wagons are passing way above them.
Do they have any burritos in the bottom of Texas there?
No. They got a bunch of ships on the Gulf. I guess it tells you all you need to
huh? How'd they know the Mexicans were? Never mind.
This looks like a train almost. Anyway, let's get on with this. As we last met up with him, he was in between times he got shot. He got shot in the leg, got healed up. Then he got shot in the knee. Remember, he was chasing after a girl, and the father shot him in the knee. He was a teenager, at this time. Of course, he's gonna, start chasing after women a little bit, especially the Indian women, the girls. And so back to the girls we go. He says, one day, me and the two other Indians, Wascovia and Estima, we'll get to know them in a little while more. They were out on the outskirts of civilization. Well, I can only imagine what civilization of them meant. Like there's a town over there with 200 people in it. Well, that's civilization over there. They had a pack mule to carry some of their equipment, and they were out, looking to steal stuff, because that's what they do. Indians steal stuff, go raid a camp. They came up to make a raid on this camp, and they were going through a thicket, and all of a sudden they came down this ravine and into the thicket. Wagon come rattling by. We're hiding, Now, I don't know what a needle gun is. Does anybody know what a needle gun is? It says Wascovia and Estima had good needle guns and an abundance of ammunition. I imagine those were like Spencer rifles or something, but he would have said Spencer rifle. I don't know what a needle gun is. And he says, I had a fine pistol and at least 100 cartridges. Well, 100 cartridges is, that's a lot of shooting. Okay, so anyway, they're gonna raid this wagon, and they just get up. The three of them, they get up and they start shooting and shooting and shooting. The wagon had three men on it, and was pulling a saddled horse. Just like out of the movies. The wagon's going along and the horse is tailing out back, and all of a sudden they start shooting, and one of the men jumps off the wagon, jumps on his horse, and hightails it out of there. And the other two, they're shooting from behind the wagon. And the boys, they're just teenage little boys, and they're shooting back. And eventually the shots stopped, and they started flinging arrows at them. Don't want to use all their shot. Men jumped back on the wagon, and away they went, hightailing it out of there. And of course, the boys, they were hiding behind a ravine. And they decided to get the hell out of there. Well, the men went back to their camp, and they brought back some bloodhounds. Sigged the dogs on them, right? And dozen armed men come rolling up and sigged the dogs on them, and they started to run. And now this is kind of funny because Schema, he says, was young and agile, so he outsped us. Wascovia was fat and big and fat, and he understood the situation and kept quite a distance ahead of me, and we leaped over ground ahead of those hounds until we had covered fully 6 miles, sometimes slacking our pace until the dogs almost reached us. It just tells you that if you are being chased by, how hard it is to outrun a dog, first off. Second off is, how many of you out there could run 6 miles and just keep up without stopping and taking a break and, resting yourself? And that got to have a hard time walking 6 miles straight without taking a break. These kids are just outrunning dogs. For 6 miles. Lucky says, thank you, Lucky. First off, Native American needle gun, a long, slender firing pin inspired by the nickname needle gun for a custom sporterized Springfield trapdoor rifle, was a popular single shot on the buffalo range. Oh, so like a big single shot buffalo gun type thing. Good job. Thank you. Okay, so he gets there, and they're running 6 miles. And Wascovia, finally, after 6 miles, Wascovia began to get out of breath. I'm thinking, you're out of breath after 6 miles. Good job, Wascovia. Holy shit. A fat kid nowadays would be lucky to run to the end of my long driveway without flopping over and saying, just let the dogs eat me. It wouldn't be, who let the dogs out? It'd be just let the dogs eat me. Because modern day kids would just give up. They would roll over on the ground and they wouldn't care. They would just say, I'm going to die. We're so wussy. Anyway, so they had to come up with a plan. I don't know why, but they jumped off a bluff. And they came to a bluff, and they jumped off into a deep ravine kind of thing, mighty yawning deep, it says. We dreaded the leap from the bluff, but we did it anyway. But the bullets from our the pursuers are shooting at them by this time. The dogs were chasing them, but the dogs, as they fell down the hill, Wascovia's hair got caught in the thicket and ripped it out of his head. Because the Indians have the long hair, and he had his hair up and, whatever. And some of it ripped out right to the scalp. At that point, anybody would be yelling and hooping, and I'm gonna dive and scalp myself, and but they kept right on going. Believe it or not, this whole entire time they carried their guns with them down the hill, the 6 miles, the whole 9 yards. And when they got to the bottom of the hill, the dogs really didn't want to attack them because the masters of the dogs were at the top of the bluff. And they said, without their masters, the dogs were kind of timid towards them. And I kind of can imagine that. Because dogs look to follow what their master says, sig them, whatever, kind of thing. So anyway, they found a river. They plunged into the river, and instead of crossing the river, they floated down the river. The dogs lost their trail, and they made a great escape. We still had our guns, he says, but our possessions were stored away on that mule. Remember, they had all their stuff on the mule. They left it behind at that thicket. Now they were 6 miles away. And so, he says here, the biggest thing, a fellow does not know how far, and this is rules to live by, I tell you. A fellow does not know how far he can run until he has the hope of life in flight and the knowledge of death in being overtaken. It just, yeah. So, when death is at your heels, you will do amazing things.
If a dinosaur is chasing you, you will run.
Yep, you will run, and you will keep on running. 6 miles. Well, anyway, they got this. They found a bee cave. They took some honey and mixed it with a little water, and they killed a beef calf or cow or whatever it was. Made some sauce out of the water and honey and the tallow. Boy, and they spread it over the meat after it had been well roasted. Oh, what a feast that was. Then they cut up the hide of the yearling and made some lariats. These kids were really resourceful, I tell you. Who does that? I mean, it'd be like you going out there and shooting a deer and saying, I shot a deer. And, well, I was out there shooting a deer. I gutted it out and roasted it right there, and we had a nice meal. Then I cut up the hide, made me a coat and some moccasins. I just didn't have anything else to do. Oh, boy. So they went on, and they found and stole three horses. So they jumped on them so they didn't have to walk. And the next night, we found ourselves in the vicinity of a small town. And there we stole a bunch of horses and made run for our headquarters. And that's all they did. Like it says, that's all they were doing. They do. Let's steal some horses. And we'll steal some more horses. And I think that's the dogs.
Whoops. We lost Robert. For some reason, I'm going to assume that I'm still here. Since
yes, I said take over for a second. Did you hear me? I had the dogs are outside the door scratching. Finally, they came.
Well, I was like, it kept us guessing for a minute there.
They were chasing that great white buffalo out there. Anyway, like I said, these kids are quite the makers. Here they are. They stole some horses, and as they went, let's steal some horses. And then he says the fate of that pack mule is shrouded in mystery. I think it's still standing there, tied to that thicket. We'll never know. We never went back. We left it and went many miles away. But we got rid of those dogs. I tell you, talk about crazy times. And then he goes on and he says, I was with the Comanches and a band of warriors and several Kiowas. I think as the Indians, the raiding died down, the Indians started to mix together. And, that's what it was. It cut off before I told Hawkeye anything. Okay. Oh, yeah, there's a time delay. So anyway, I think that from what I keep reading, it seems like other bands of Indians would join other bands of Indians because they were getting far and few. And what do? You team up with whoever you can, because you realize we're not enemies anymore. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
Yep.
So they banded with some Kiowas and they went out on the Pecos and they discovered a large herd of cattle driven by 10 or 12 cowboys. We stampeded the herd and drove off the cattle. And the cowboys put up a stiff fight, but we shot a few of them and then we run the cattle off. We had killed them all, but they put up a good fight, he says. And we drove the cattle away out onto the plains. Well, once you get them on the plains, that's Indian territory, Nobody goes up there. So we killed some of them, and we set the other ones loose on the prairie for a long time. And wherever we needed one, we'd just go out there and, kill one or two and have meat. And really after I start reading all this, I realized that the Indians, as the buffalo were going away, they started killing cattle to supplement, because the cattle were now replacing the buffalo. And of course, they were stealing the horses, killing the cattle, and society is coming along. And you're realizing that the Indians had to go away. They really did, because there was no room left for them there.
And also something that you just said. Now there weren't any buffalo, and now there were cattle. Yeah. Well, the buffalo didn't belong to anybody, but now the cows do. So not only because now you're going to piss off the rancher, and you just didn't do that back then. So, but that was cattle rustling. So they'd hang you on the spot. But so anyway. But the fact that cows moved out there did present an extra issue for them to say, we got to get rid of them damn Indians.
Exactly. And his way of thinking, he's telling it like an Indian would think. That's what's so cool about this book, is because he's telling it from the Indian perspective of how it thinks. And as you were talking about now, the cattle and the horses and stuff, he puts right in.
Did he just freeze up there?
Just froze. I've just froze. Okay, I'm back again. Yes, Scotty is right. They hung horse and cattle thieves, but what do you do with an Indian? You can't really, go out there and say, "Hey, you Indian, you stole the horses or cattle." But see, the Indians were hungry. That's what it was. The Indians are hungry and they want to eat, and the white man don't understand. So when they go out and kill the cattle, the Indian doesn't think much difference between a cow and a buffalo. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Not to the white man anyway.
Yeah, not to the white man. So I imagine this area in here between these mountains and all the way up here is probably the area they're in, because it's the least populated. So this is still the plains, somewhere in here, because the coast always gets the population first. Everything from this side, Louisiana, Arkansas, that's getting populated, but Texas is still pretty empty here. He says a large part of us went down in the San Saha and the Llano rivers and got big lot of horses. And he says to this is why I'm saying he's thinking like an Indian. Those early settlers were very kind to raise horses for us. It saved us a lot of trouble. I'm thinking, yeah, those white men are pretty nice. Look they raised all these horses and we just come in and take them up. They don't give us much fight. Pretty nice of them. Good job. Saves us a lot of trouble, right? Gather them up, put them in a corral. All we got to do is go down there and grab them. And then they did, but they were being followed by Rangers. So we hurried along and outran them, of course. But you know what happened? While they were away from their camp, a bunch of soldiers and some Tonkawa Indians, we talked about them before, they're deadly arch enemies, came along, and a number of our women and they slayed a bunch of our women in camp. Several women and children were made captives and then taken to Fort Griffin. So we lost a bunch of squaws, he says, and some people while they were trying to escape. And and the prettiest girl, he says, the daughter of one of the chiefs, she Nokoni, a beautiful Indian maiden, she had been disemboweled and scalped.
Oh,
he says, and it was a disgusting sight, he says. So he was mad. So were the Indians. He says, other bodies were mutilated too, which showed the hand of the Tonkawa. Remember, the Tonkawa in a couple of episodes back, they were the ones that raided the camp or killed one of their comrades and were roasting one of the legs to eat. Yep. They recognized it and says, "Hey, that's Yellow Hand over there, and that's his leg. I recognize it." And they didn't like that. They were all against it. They found a bunch of the men and women, and this is how they were going to settle the score. Listen to this one. So we had a council, and we swore to take 10 captive white women and twice as many white children, and to avenge the death of our squaws, especially Nokoni. Who wouldn't want to avenge the death of the prettiest squaw in the camp? We vowed to kill a white woman for each year of her age, he says. She was about 18 years old, too. I guess that's kind of almost an old maid in that day and age, I guess. And that we would disembowel every one we kill. Some of the warriors were going back to the settlements at once and starting in on our revenge. We were badly demoralized, and we had to get our forces together and move in to a new part of the country before seeking revenge. And we went far up on the plains, and then, of course, guess who comes along? Quanah Parker and 4 other Indians came to us, and they urged us to go on to the reservation, saying that the Indians' wild life was over. And Quanah must have been a really good talker. You know what I mean? He must have been super good at talking, because he urged them and told them it was useless for us to fight any longer, for the white people would kill us all, and if we kept on fighting. And if we went back to the reservation, the Great White Father at Washington, that must have been hard for some Indian guy to show up at your camp after your women and children have been killed and disemboweled, to come up and then still talk to you calm enough to persuade you and tell you the Great White Father in Washington, someplace unknown to you that you've never seen before, and say he will feed us and give us homes, and we would become more like the white man with lots of good horses and cattle and pretty things to wear. He said the white man had us completely surrounded, and in a way he was really right. The white man did have them surrounded. They just didn't know it. There was white men, they couldn't go west, they couldn't go east, they couldn't go south or north. The white man was everywhere. They just didn't see it. And it says they were going to go he urged them to go to Fort Sill and give themselves up. Quanah remained with us about 4 days, promising us that if we go to Fort Sill, we would not be punished or hurt in any way. That would all be well with us. And then finally we agreed, and we went along with him. Most of them were reluctant. He says, myself, his shorty, Kotapa, Estima, and Waskova, his buddies. And then he says, we started out, and Quanah set out scouts, ahead of us to notify the soldiers that he was bringing in a bunch of Indians. But then we heard the soldiers. We seen the dust. The dust was coming. We seen the soldiers. He says, I got scared. I turned my horse around and I ran as fast as I could the opposite direction. Well, Quanah Parker himself turned his horse around and chased little Herman Lehman down. And he told him not to be scared. He chased him, believe it or not. Quanah took after me and ran for 3 or 4 miles before he caught me. I tell you, that's quite the. I'm determined to catch this guy. 3 or, and that's a long ways for a horse to run. I tell you, that is.
Especially all out.
Yeah, I ride horses. If I rode a quarter of a mile at full gallop or something, I'm ready to slow down and do some walking. Even if I got a fast horse, I ran them. We used to race out at a place down at the Castle Rock Park, and we'd go take our horses down there, and we had a mile-long stretch. It was all dirt road, a mile long of dirt road, and we raced down that one time. Time we got to the end of that mile, I was just tired of running. I was like, I'm ready for my horse to walk. My horse was about ready to walk too at that point. I don't know how these other horses do it, but anyway, I just tell you, I was like, I'm all tired of. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go slow. Well, apparently, not these guys. And well, anyway, he caught him. He says, "You won't be hurt, and I know you're afraid, and I would not agree to go with him." So he told me, gave me directions to go to his camp, and he gave me and meet him there. Well, anyway, we got back to, he got back to the crowd and the soldiers and had his comrade. They had his comrades surrounded, and they were all the Indians were disarmed. Anyway, so and everybody was taken to Fort Sill, and they were all placed in the stockade. See, I think little Herman Lehman, he knew, deep down in his gut, he knew that he'd be put in a stockade. And so other ones were kept as prisoners. And, I followed Quanah's instructions and found his camp without being seen by the soldiers. He says, my comrades were made to work around the post and do farm work, like that's woman's work or something, which they were not familiar. Of course, these were Indians. They didn't know nothing about farm work. He says, I stayed with Quanah and herded his horses for him and hunted occasionally. And somewhat reconciled my situation. He says, after I had been to Fort Sill for a while, 2 of our Indians, Estima and Sancho, Estima was his buddy, remember? They had to stand guard and watch the cattle. But every now and then, some of the cattle got away. Ooh, shame, because I was, you're an Indian. You were probably saying, what the heck? So what? I'll just go out and catch them tomorrow, right? I'll go steal some from the other guy over there, because to them, herding the cows isn't like the buffalo. The buffalo just run around, and when we need one, we just go out and shoot one, right? Well, anyway, they got pretty bored with this, and they got punished every time the cattle got away. They were made to chop wood. Now, I've chopped a lot of wood, and I know that's a lot of work. And in Indian, that's torture because they don't chop wood. That's not in their plan. So they plan to get away. So one day, they asked the guard for some tobacco, and of course, the guard is just a dumbass, Sure, I'll give you a little bit of tobacco. And they knocked him in the head with an axe. That can't be good. Because unlike a hammer or a shovel, the axe points on both ends. So I don't think that ended well. He fell and they got his gun and ammunition and ran away. What do you think? Oh, boy. He says, well, eventually, he's there, and they were on this reservation, and the Apaches came along from his region, and they were trying to kill him. One day he was herding some horses and stuff, and some shots were fired in his direction, and he fell off the horse and played dead, just like in the movies. You know what? The more I read this is just like in the movies. The shots rang out, bang, bang, and he goes, oh, and falls off the horse. He knows how to do that. And then he laid there, played possum. Yep, played possum until he heard the other Indians where they were, and then he got his gun, he started shooting. He shot and shot and shot. And all of a sudden he heard one man yell out a little bit, and he got on his horse and he ran off and he reported to the Quanah. Quanah came out and says, where's my men? He called up all of his men and found that 5 of them were missing. Search was made, and they found one of them was being carried. The 5 men were carrying a wounded Indian. They had all kinds of excuses, he says. The worst one, he says, was they just wanted to scare me. But in the end, Quanah got it out of him. He says some cowardly Apaches had hired these Indians to kill me. Go figure, right? Well, anyway, it boils down to sometime after that, he got very sick. And this medicine man, Yellow Wolf, who lived with Quanah Parker, he boiled lots of herbs and gave me delicious concoctions to drink. And they kept me wrapped in poultices and nursed me carefully until I recovered. Poor old Yellow Wolf. Now listen to this. This is kind of interesting because this is something an Indian would do because he isn't familiar with technology. So they went someplace, Yellow Wolf and Quanah Parker. They went to Fort Worth. And he says they were staying at a hotel. They blew out the gas. And the next morning, Yellow Wolf was found dead and Quanah Parker was almost dead. Remember, they ran back in those days, they ran lines. Instead of electric lines, they ran gas lines in the house. Everywhere to light the gas lamps. You're literally putting propane gas in lines, running it to street lights and houses and whatever. And I suppose those Indians decided that, I want to go to sleep and here's a light. And they just, I'll put the light out. Blew on it. They not realizing that you must have to turn the handle to shut the light.
Or they wanted to get rid of him and they blew him out as to kill him.
No, because they were in their room.
Dumb accident.
No, I think the Indians would have. That's what I was trying. It says here they were at a hotel in Fort Worth. They blew out the gas. Next morning, Yellow Wolf was found dead, and Quanah was almost dead because they would have been asphyxiated from a carbon monoxide.
No, they would have been asphyxiated by the gas.
The gas, yes, they would have been asphyxiated by the gas. Their own doing, because if you got a lamp in your room and you don't know to shut the knob off, you would just blow it out like a candle, which I'm sure they were familiar with candles or a stick with fire. What do? You blow it out,
Well, also kerosene lamps, you lifted up a little thing and you blew it out. So if they blew out the gas, that would have been also difficult to do.
Well, whichever way they did, they blew it out, but they didn't know to shut the gas off.
Right.
And that,
understood.
So I can imagine they did it to themselves. But anyway, he recovered. And, soon after that, the people were starting to call him Charlie Ross instead of, whatever his name was in Indian. And then one of the troops come up, one of the captains or officers, and said, to Quanah that this boy's people are still alive and they're living down, yonder, and we're going to take them to him. And he didn't want to go. He didn't understand. So they got a Comanche interpreter named Jones. And Jones explained to him that his people were alive, his mother, his father, everybody else. And, he didn't want to go. He didn't want to go back. Quanah says, you do. And I'm going back to my wigwam, he says. And, little Herman went a little crazy, tried to, kill the Jones guy, tried to shoot him with his bow, and Quanah had to stop him and eventually calmed him down. And he says, and again, Quanah must have been a great talker because he persuaded him to give up and go with the soldiers and go home. And he did. And so he's waiting to go home. And then some of his buddies, of course, said, no, don't go home, Let's get out of here. Let's all of us grab us a squaw. Let's steal a squaw and then steal on out of here, and we'll go live out on the plains like we used to do. They didn't like to be captivated, or captured. I imagine, that was torture. It was like being in prison, even though you weren't. You're on the reservation. You're captured. And so the Indians proposed to me that we steal a squaw a piece and run away. And I went and talked to a girl, and she consented to go. We went to meet that night. My comrades stole another Indian squaw and got 2 good horses and made a good escape. My girl was true to her promise and stole everything she could carry. Waited for me under a nearby daylight until daylight. I started off when I was nearly to where she was waiting. He almost got away with it. The soldier discovered me and gave chase. I ran off a bluff and fell into a creek and came near freezing. And I was eventually driven back to camp. So the soldiers watched me carefully after that, he says. And about this time, General Mackenzie himself saw my mother in Fredericksburg and told her about me being there for Sill. So eventually, when everything came along, they grabbed me up and headed me back to, and I wanted to go back. But Quanah Parker again came to the rescue and says, you go see your mother, your brother, and your family. And if you should not like it, you come back and live with me. He agreed to that. And he says, I left all my Indian property with Quanah and his company. With 5 soldiers and a driver, I started to Loyal Valley in Mason County, Texas, to see my mother. Oh, but the trip was crazy. But along the way, they gave him a gun and told him to go out and shoot them some food, and he did. And he brought home the bacon, he says, basically. On the 5th day, he planned on killing one of the soldiers and running away. But after thinking it over, he didn't really have anywhere to go. And so he just pointed the gun at the soldier and made him, lay down on the ground. And then he chased him off back to the wagon and made a fool of him. Told him, vamos, get out of here. Well, anyway, along the trip, which must have been quite far, he was allowed to kill game for him. Until one day, they came to a big water hole. And again, this is with the water thing. I don't know what the Indians had against water, but I also found out something else. He says they came to the water, and the soldiers caught some big bullfrogs. They fried them up in lard. But I would not eat them, for it was against the Comanches' rules to eat lard. I would not eat with the soldiers anymore. Frogs and swine, both water or mud animals, were too much for me. It's like, he was almost like he's Jewish. Oh, it's pork. It gets worse too, because it comes up again where it's bad. So anyway, eventually he gets to this river, this town, Loyal Valley, and people start coming up to see the Indian boy, the captive Indian boy, to see him. He was like a sight, he was like a show then. And Yeah, exactly. Like, oh my gosh, let's see the Indian boy. Well, anyway, eventually he met up with his mother because he didn't even know who she was. He erased her from his memory. He met up with his brother and his sister, and people kept saying Herman, Herman, Herman. That was his name. And he realized that was his name. Um, and then eventually he recognized his brother and his sister first, and they figured out who he was by a scar on his arm when he was little he'd gotten. And he says, I knew I'd found my people, but I was an Indian, and I did not like them because they were pale faces. Well, even though, they were they were his people, he didn't like them. So anyway, eventually his mother won him over. He realized that was his mother, and she had married this other guy because his dad had died, and she married Philip Buckmeyer, who died sometime in the 1890s. Anyway, he was a white boy. He played around a lot, made arrows and was shooting at people, and riding horses and showing his horse skills and things like that. He was showing off. He did some dances, and he was hooping it up like an Indian, and I think people got entertainment out of it all for a while. And then he was being conditioned to go back into society. Now he's with his family. He says how he liked food, so his sister fixed him up food every chance she got. At night, I would not sleep in the house, he says, although they prepared a nice feather bed for me and arranged everything for my comfort. I made a pallet of my own blankets out on the ground. And his little brother, Willie, went and slept with him. Just keep him company. Anyway, my folks, goes back to the pork again. My folks prepared a big feast for me, and Mia came to invite me to the table. I pretended not to hear her, but lay on my pallet of blankets. I was homesick and was planning to run away from there. And she, a woman, being even his sister, enticed me to go to the table. I sat down. I saw a big, fine hog ham on the table. I kicked over everything in my reach and made for the door. But they stopped me and motioned for me to come eat. I tell you what, I'd be parents, I'd be like freaking out. Oh my gosh, he kicked over the table with our pork on it. He ruined the meal. I pointed to the pork and made them understand that if they would remove that, I would eat. It was removed, and I sat down and tried to eat, but the food did not suit me. And they thought of having to eat my thought of having to eat with pork with hog eaters choked me. Now I suppose he's looking. I wanted my meat roasted, and I didn't care for anything else. So he went out and smoked cigarettes, he says. One thing I did enjoy was good tobacco. Now remember, he's only like 17 or coming 18. I went down to the creek and made a bow, many arrows, waged war against my hog family. I would saddle up my pony and go out hunting. Somebody gave me a Winchester, and my stepfather furnished me with cartridges. He said, I went with my brother Willie a lot of places. He was keeping an eye on me. And then we seen some signs. We seen some horses. And we seen some cows. And I said, let's go down and kill some of those calves. We'll have dinner tonight. My brother says, that's not the way we do things. Can you imagine? Look, the neighbor's calves are down there. I killed 3 of them. I'm going to get hung.
Yeah, really.
Then he says, and then we seen some horses. And he says, let's take all the horses we saw. But Willie would not allow that. I was mad all the time. In fact, nothing pleased me. I can imagine, you get in, in the Indian culture, you just steal what you need, you kill what you need. You're hungry, you go kill something and you eat it. You want a horse, you steal it and you ride it. In regular society, you kill somebody's cow, they hang you. You kill somebody's horse or steal it, they hang you. There's rules. There's rules. Not in the Indian world. Not like that. And so nothing would make him happy, but he did go out and he was also mad. Again, he says he would go out and kill a deer and he'd put it on his pony and ride up to the gate and he'd jump off and just leave it. Somebody better go and skin it and tend to my horse. And nobody was doing that. And he was pissed because that's squaw work. Squaws clean the meat. Squaws put away my horse. Squaws do the work. He didn't understand that. He says somebody had to take my pony and do the. And what kind was it? What kind was it? This was all for the squaws. I was furious if they failed to roast me some short ribs or tenderloins. But they tried to do everything to please me for several months, and I learned how to behave. He says, and I guess that's what our society boils down to. We'd be kind of wild men if we didn't really know how to behave in it, right?
Yeah, and there's some folks these days that still don't know how to behave.
This is definitely true.
Seems like manners have just gone out the window.
That is true. That is true. He says crowds would gather to see what they called the Indian boy. I would jump on the wildest horse as it ran by me without either a bridle or a saddle. I would cut many capers to delight them. One day, while I was amusing the crowd of spectators, they did not seem to take much interest. And guess what they were going? They all the people were heading away to a big tent down the road. He heard some singing and shouting. He didn't know what was going on. There was people gathered everywhere. Why, a man in a long coat mumbled something at first, but gradually grew louder, and people began singing off of his speech. What he'd stumbled on was one of those traveling preachers. It was a Methodist shouting meeting, one of those religious ceremonies. So I rushed in and I gave the Comanche yell, woo! And a bunch of people stampeded out of the way, he says. I took over a bunch of seats and I started dancing and, the Indian way and yelling and whooping, woo, woo, He says, go along with this. Eventually, my mother came along and my brother, and he says, my people never permitted me to go to another Methodist revival again until I could understand English. He says here, he says, I've seen just as much earnest and less hypocrisy among the Indians in their worship as I ever seen since I came among the whites.
Read that again.
I'll read the whole thing. My people never permitted me to go to another Methodist revival until I could understand English and knew how to behave myself. True, I broke up the meeting that day, but I was just as earnest, just as fervent, just as candid and sincere as the most sanctified among them. Only one mode did not conform to their theories. I have seen just as much earnestness and less hypocrisy among the Indians in their worship as I have ever seen since I came among the whites.
Less hypocrisy.
Yes.
Think about that, y'all. Less hypocrisy. He lived among the Indians who, stole things and killed people, scalped them, lived on the prairie, but he found less hypocrisy among those folks than he did the white people.
Yeah. Doesn't that just tell you something?
Yeah, but remember that he found less What is hypocrisy? Oh my God. So, but to this day, there's still hypocrisy among the peoples. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yep. Yes, Chloe, 10-10, 8-10. Yeah. Well, we got a little bit to finish and this book is done. So bear with me and David will be on with his story in a moment. It's already got picked out and I'm sure you got some cards already.
Yep, I got cards ready.
Yep. So anyway, he goes on how he started being bored. So he started shooting hats off of people with his bow and arrow. And stuff like that. People started avoiding him for a while. He says, in due course of time, I learned to talk English and German languages, and I became friends with everybody in the community. Yeah, so he feared children towards the title of friendship, and older ones began to regard me as an equal in social scale. I learned to work and often would be hired by ranchmen and farmers there. And it goes on. About in 1890, he was married to Miss Fanny Light, a Loyal Valley, and 5 children were born, 2 boys and 3 girls, and they are now grown and occupy places of usefulness in the world. My oldest boy, Henry, died in the U.S. Army camp at Houston, Texas, during the World War. He says his career has been all over the place, and civilizations have wrought with great change in me. When I was a savage, I thirsted to kill and to steal because I had been taught that and was the way to live. I know now that it is wrong. Well, in white man society, it is wrong. I would not take human life now, nor would I steal. The way of the transgressor is hard, and is saying that is true. And he says now that he's an old man of 70 years, if death does not claim me, 70 years of wonderful experience. I've seen, this is the part where we're talking about change and stuff. He says, I have seen many changes since I came into this world. The ox cart gave way to horse-drawn vehicles, and the automobile has surpassed that mode of travel. Speeding railroad trains, flying machines, radios, many other wonderful wonders have come to pass. We are living in a fast age. I am glad God has spared my life and permitted me to live in these wonderful changes. Then he says, during these great changes and as he was living through these things, he's still at this point in time, remember, this is 1932, he cannot understand how the human voice can be wavered over the radio thousands of miles without the aid of wires, but it has been done, for I have heard it, he says. It is a mystery to me. Then he reverts on some of the things that they first seen as technology invaded the Indian lands. And he says, the first telegraph I ever saw, a party of Indians were coming down into the settlements on a raid when at the point of the vicinity of Fort Concho. We came upon a newly constructed telegraph line. We stopped and considered it. Can you imagine a bunch of Indians out there looking at this telegraph line? And they're going, what the fudge is that?
And it goes from pole to pole to pole to pole. Look how many poles there are.
That's right. He says, we considered it and wondered what it meant. Each Indian had his own notion about what it was and intended what it was intended for, but we were all wrong. And, I could just imagine each one of them going. The chief says, well, I believe it to be a fence, but it's made so high that the Indians cannot be kept in. We could proceed. So they proceeded to cut it down. And coming down into the settlement, we stole some horses and we went back the way we drove. And then we found the line had been rebuilt and the wire was in place again. like it was magic. Huh? Look at, we're gonna cut it down, see what's up. What is this? And then they come back and wow, look, it's up again. Then he says the puffing locomotive and the railway train were also objects of wonder. I came back to civilization and beheld them. The first train I ever saw was while I was with the Indians, and of course we did not know what it was. We got scared and almost drove us frantic. We had come far down into the settlements on a raid. It may never been near Austin, Texas. And one night, while we were waiting in a scheduled spot in a little ravine for the moon to come up, trains came by, and suddenly around a curve from behind a mountain, and it was right on us. And before we had time to mount our horses, the hideous monster, belching smoke and hissing steam, and with a glaring light, bore down upon us as at terrific speed, and we ran, scrambling over the rocks and through the brush to get away from it. It followed us for a little ways. We thought we had, but it lost our trail as we went rushing away from it. We were scattered for a while. Then things became quiet. I was uneasy with fear. Oh, I mean, for the first time to see a train, it's dark at night. You see the belching smoke coming out of, it'd be like it's a dragon, it's coming up. It's, blowing the horn, and the big headlight, because, I'm pretty sure the Indians hadn't seen a headlight before.
Not like that.
So now you got this light in the dark, and, it's coming around a mountainside, and they weren't expecting it. And, it's a tremendous speed, which I think trains back in that day, maybe 30 or 35 miles an hour was top speed. You're talking, yeah.
And let me go on with that a little bit. When I first moved to Georgia many moons ago, 50 years ago, golly, the first house I rented was like about 300 yards from the railroad track. And you had to cross the railroad track. You had to go down the hill. So the railroad track, they had cut the railroad through a hill. So it wasn't really a ravine, but they cut right through the hill so the train didn't have to go up and down anything. So anyway, at nighttime, the train coming out of Moultrie was picking up speed.
Yep.
And so by the time it reached where we lived, it was just really starting to crank it out, man. It was out in the country and it was hauling butt. Well, I would go down there at night and you could see it come around the curve and you could see the light and you could hear the doom, 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 and you could start to feel the ground tremble. And the tracks were, were kind of wriggling around a little bit. And as it came, the chugging got harder and they blew the whistle because there was a train track down there crossing the road. So they always blew the whistle. And then it just puff, puff, puff. But when it reached that area where it went through, it was almost like a tunnel. But where it went through that hill, the chugga chugga, the woom woom, and all of that just reverberated off the sides. And it was really scary. Yeah. And I mean, for somebody that had knew what trains were, going through that section and everything, the extra noise and loudness that reverberated off of the walls. So I can imagine that I've seen trains before and it scared me. So I can only imagine what it was for somebody having never seen anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just technology that they didn't understand. Like I said, when they said, the Great White Father in Washington said he's going to give us houses and food, I wouldn't even understand who the heck is the Great White Father? Where is Washington? I don't get it. All I know is this. I can ride days and days and days with my horse, hours at a run and still never see the Great White Father.
Yeah. And the other thing is they didn't say that, this is another great white father. Oh, well,
Yeah.
this is another great white father. What? Every 4 years we get a new one.
Yeah, they didn't understand that either. So anyway, this is the last bit of it. Anyway, he says, it made reference to Quanah Parker, the well-known Comanche chief who was my friend and who in many ways proved that he was my friend. When he included the Comanche to go, or induced the Comanche to go on the reservation, the band, I was withheld out for a long time and would not consent to go in. He finally persuaded these Indians to go to Fort Sill and give up and receive allotments. But I was abstaining and I would not go to the post. As stated elsewhere in this book, Quanah sent me to his camp, where I stayed in concealment. In the year 1877, I was adopted into Quanah Parker's family. I was 17 years old at the time, but at the age of a young Indian, Buck is considered a grown man. Mr. Clark, the government agent at the time, issued government rations to Quanah Parker for my maintenance as his Quanah's child. I lived with Quanah's family for 3 years, or until I was brought home to my people. We just read about that. By the soldiers. I am and still considered a member of Quanah Parker's family and am recognized as such by Quanah's squaws and children, who bestowed upon me all the affection and kindness given a full blood brother. And there you go. You know everything there is to know about Herman Lehman. Maybe. But the point is, go out, get your own book, read the whole thing. It is really interesting. You might find some stuff, but it's amazing how times are changing. Like I said, in the little bit of time that he lived, he went, like you said, from the ox wagon to horse-drawn wagon to the car to flying to telegraphs and telephones and TVs. In 1932, I think they had TVs by that time, and the amount of stuff that changed. The trains changed, from barely moving to speeding bullets going, crazy stuff. Big ships in the ocean, World War. He lived through the First World War.
Moving pictures.
Airplanes. Yeah, it was a great time for change. He was born in 1859, just before the Civil War. He didn't have to fight in the Civil War, but he fought on the plains. Considering that he was out there killing and scalping people and stealing horses and cattle and living in a teepee, and went from that to, putting a suit on every day or living in a house. And it's hard to fathom, just like us right now. You're older than I am. Things have changed in your era. I know from myself. Yeah. The phone hanging on the wall to now it's putting in my pocket. It can go in, and computer used to be, the computer was huge. Now you can just fold it up and take it with you. Someday
as I was growing up, we went from the dial phone to the push button phone.
Yep.
That was a huge deal. We went from analog to digital back then in the early 70s, right? But the fact that you can go doot, 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 and not have to dial all them dadgum numbers, ladies and gentlemen, folks that grow up these days go, so what's the big deal? You get an old phone and dial a number. See how long it takes you, to the point where all you could do was like boop, 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 boop. That was it was huge.
Yeah, I remember when the first phones, and you had that big long antenna you'd put up, and I can do it cordless. I'm cordless. Now look at us. We're all cordless. Oh, yeah.
and digital,
Digital, yeah.
and
You
and
know,
and HD. You know,
yeah. Who would have thought that? Years ago you got the black and white TV, then you went to the color TV, and now you can just put it on your phone. I can watch TV on this little itty bitty screen anywhere I want.
and
Kind of
carry
thing.
it around with me.
Yeah,
Of course, I'm getting fried by the 5G network, but
yeah. I know, crazy, isn't it?
oh goodness gracious me.
Crazy.
Yeah, technology does have its place, I tell you. But the idea that in my lifetime, in my 72 years, that, oh, well, we had, there were airplanes and we had jets by the time I was growed a little bit,
Yeah,
and, of course, we had trains and automobiles and all that good stuff. And, then we actually got the automatic, for cars
yeah,
instead of everything with stick shift. So there are a lot of little changes that for those of us at the time was a really, really big deal. Like the
yeah,
push button phone, versus the dial rotary phone.
yeah,
Oh, if you had a push button phone, people wanted to just come to your house just to push it, you know. So, but I'm hoping that these new generations of people will take a little bit of time if our history isn't erased entirely and understand just how flippin' far we really have come just in my lifetime, and
mhm,
not counting what's happened just in the last 25 years. So, we read these things, legends and stuff from 100 years ago or more, and what it was like back then. And why do we do this? To try to give people a sense and a feeling of what life really was like here in America. Here, maybe just up the road from me or down the road from you, or you know what I mean? And
yeah,
so, and people live this way and they eked out life and livings, and people these days just get mad when their battery runs down, it just. So I
yeah,
hope somewhere along the line people won't forget where we come from, if that makes any sense.
yeah, yeah. No, no, I agree. Um, yeah, the Scotty Boy says we had an old phone with a cranking handle. Yeah, I had a cup of don't work, but yeah, how about that?
Yeah,
Hmm.
and we
But
did know
anyway,
a few people out in the country that still had those phones for real. But
yeah,
most everybody in Tampa and the neighborhoods, we all had rotary phones, but they all were connected. We didn't have to crank them. But we did have party lines. You'd pick up the
oh,
receiver and they'd go, busy, and you'd hang up and wait until they got done talking. So
I
people these
remember.
days it would drive them mad. You mean I have to wait on somebody before I
Yeah,
can talk? Yeah, shut
yeah.
up.
I remember when I was a kid, we had the party line. Because I was stupid, I wanted to talk to my grandma, and I'd just pick up the phone, and she was always on the phone with Annie up the road, and then I'd pick it up. I'm coming over, Grandma. Hey, you're not supposed to be on here. You just can't pick up that phone. you know?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And you'd pick
Anyway,
up the phone, and if you didn't recognize who the neighbor was, because it was usually in your neighborhood,
yeah,
you'd go, hey, who is this anyway? Well, this is Martha from down on the corner. Oh, sounds like he got a cold. Okay, bye.
yeah. Scotty Boy says I would listen to them talking. Yeah, but if they caught you, people get mad. You're listening to our
Really mad.
conversation.
There wasn't nothing they could do, but they'd get mad.
Yeah. Anyway, you got a good story tonight. Oh, I get
I
my
think
voice.
so.
I hope so. Yeah, we'll get this. Come on, there we go. Everybody's waiting for the story. I know that. How about that? There we go. All set and ready to go.
Let me blow my nose. I'm
Yep.
getting me a sip. Oh, I got to.
Yeah, I guess we just all have to consider ourselves lucky, and we're living in the future. We're living in the Jetsons time, you know. We don't even know it. That's the funny part.
Yeah, and
So,
I wish, that we had them dang flying cars for real, but
oh, give it another 10 or 20 years, and there'll be flying cars of some sort. There'll
well, they
be,
do over in Japan and China. They're trying out some of those, you know, they're great big giant um, drones.
yeah. Well, I
But
mean,
hey, if
think
they'll
about it.
work,
I think drones are like our newest technology that has really amazed me in my lifetime because there was a computer and I got on the beginning of that. I remember rolling that Apple II computer around and punching in stuff so I could, when I was in high school. But um but then the drones came along. Those are the two things, the computer and the drones are probably the biggest things I've seen in my lifetime, because most of the other things like cars, they've made improvements with cars, but we still had cars. They've made improvements with planes, but they still had planes. They still have ships. They just made improvements. They just didn't have drones back in the day, or they didn't have computers. They had
right?
phones. It was just that, even in the James Bond movies, they had phones in their car, but so I think the computers, in my perspective, computers and drones are probably the two most ingenious, neat things I could say that we've accomplished in my lifetime. And who
And
knows what'll be next.
and let me add a little 10 cents since you brought it up. Um, there are folks out there who go, so what about it? What big deal, drones? Well, if you look at some of these prototypes of some of these aerial vehicle type cars, they're based upon some type of drone technology. But
Yep.
the drone technology has helped to improve aerodynamics in ways people never understood. There are folks sitting at home designing propellers
Yep.
and with different, bends and lifts and there are people with little tiny computers, Arduino thingies, and they're programming different things into these little microcompressors. And they've got cameras now, and some of the cameras can actually swivel where the drone is flying still. The camera can look down. I mean, there are things like that is going on. It's like it isn't just the drone, it's what's going with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got
Well,
cameras. Oh, but this one does this on a drone. Oh, we
yeah.
got radios. Yeah, but my drone communicates with me and I can look at it through a viewfinder. Oh, and it'll flip upside down and it'll turn around. It will come home on its own.
Yeah, I know. I got one of those drones, and it's
Right.
amazing all the things it does. And it's like, wow, this is cool. I mean, when a guy, just your average Joe guy, can go and buy a drone that does all this stuff, and I can put that thing high up in the sky and see my property, and take a picture of it. When I was a kid, there was planes that would fly over. Oops, that was good. Planes would fly over and take pictures of your house, and then a guy would come by and try to sell them to you.
Yep.
Now you just get a drone flying above, you got all the pictures you want.
Yep.
Eliminated that guy's job.
So the technology that has come with the drones, which is started with model airplanes a long time ago,
Yeah.
but so that field is still really big. But I hope that the hobbyist will push the market for flying cars.
Yes.
Because They're designing drones and propellers and such that it's the lift and the motion and all that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, let's keep our fingers crossed that somebody out there's already had a brainiac idea. We just need to make it, you know. So let me shut up and let's get to the story.
All right. It's all yours.
It's all mine and urine. Okay. I'm still reading out of the Indian book, Glooscap Country and Other Indian Tales by Cyrus McMillan, 1922. This next story is called The Partridge and His Drum. The Partridge and His Drum. In far back times, when only Indians dwelt in Canada, Glooscap, who was lord and master of the tribes, chose Partridge from among all his creatures to be the boat builder for the birds of the sea. Partridge was then a very wonderful bird, very different from what he is today. He dwelt always along the ocean shore, on the banks of great rivers, and he could swim like a duck or a gull. He could change his shape to that of a man. He knew all the country well, and often he wandered far through the woods looking for good trees from which to build his boats. Among all the people, he was held in high regard because of his skill. He was always industrious and always busy. And at all hours of the day and late into the night, he could be heard hammering at his canoes, making a sound like a man tapping quickly on a drum. But he lost his reputation through no fault of his own. He no longer builds boats. The power to make the strange sound of his hammering is all that remains of him, of his former greatness. It happened that one very cold day, Partridge walked alone over the snow in the deep forest near the shore of a great lake, looking for lumber for his boats. On the bank of a stream, he saw 4 beautiful maidens sitting on the ice, braiding their long hair. He knew that they were nymphs or fairies of the stream, and he watched them from behind a tree. He had long desired to win a stream fairy for his bride, but up to that time, he had found it an impossible task, for the fairies were very timid. As he watched them now, he thought to himself, perhaps I can catch one of them and carry her off. So he stealthily slipped from behind the tree, crept along towards the bank. But the water nymphs, who could hear the smallest of sounds, heard his footsteps, and looking around, they spied him among the trees. Uh-oh, they all cried, and all at once they all dropped into the icy water and disappeared. Now Partridge, being then a river dweller and of very great strength, was a good fisherman. Many a time he had caught the slippery harbor seals, and often he had dined plentifully on their meat. He hit upon a crafty trick by which to seize a nymph. He cut a number of branches from a spruce tree, and sticking them upright in the snow on the shore, he hid behind them and waited for the nymphs to appear again. Sure enough, they soon came back and sat upon the ice, braiding their long hair. Partridge put his head over the boughs to take a peek at them so that he might pick out the most beautiful. But again they saw him, and with the same frightened cry, "Oh, oh!" they dropped quickly into the sea. After them went Partridge, although he knew that the water was very cold. He caught one, but she slipped through his arms, and when he came to the surface, he had only her hair ribbon in his hand. Now, in those old days, water nymphs in this part of the sea could not live long enough without their hair ribbons, for the ribbons contained always much of their magical power. Partridge knew this, and he knew too that sooner or later the nymph would wander about on land looking for her lost charm. So he put the ribbon in his pocket, and with a light heart, he went about his business of seeking wood for his boats. That night, when he went back to his tent, he hid the ribbon not far from his hand in hope of the fairy's visit. Then, pretending to sleep, he closed his eyes and waited. He had not been there long when there came in very soft the beautiful water nymph in search of her lost ribbon. Now, when a water nymph sets foot in the dwelling of man or animal without her hair ribbon, she is always powerless. This Partridge knew well. He sprang quickly from his couch, caught her with little trouble, and easily persuaded her to remain with him as his wife. This was against Glooskap's orders, for Glooskap knew that if one of his people married a water nymph, no good could come of it. But Glooskap said nothing. Partridge and his nymph wife lived happily enough for a time, but he always feared for her safety when he went far away looking for lumber for his boats, for many evil creatures were always about in the forest. And he always said to her before he went away, "Keep the doors tightly barred while I am gone, for many wicked people and robbers prowl through the woods, and they will try to enter the tent, perhaps to kill you." And she always promised to be on her guard. One day, Partridge went far away in search of lumber for a new fleet of boats he was then building. In the afternoon, he came to a grove of wonderful cedar trees. He wished to examine it carefully, and as night was coming on, for winter nights come early in the Canadian woods, he decided to stay there until the next day. So as the day went down, he made a bed of boughs and went to sleep. He had no fear for his wife's safety, for she had promised to keep the doors barred. Meanwhile, his wife waited at home for his coming. When the stars came out, she knew that he would not come home that night, and being sleepy, she went to bed, first seeing that the doors were securely fastened. She felt very lonely all by herself in the big tent, for Partridge, because of the troublesome nose of his boat building, dwelt a good distance away from his neighbors. At midnight, she was awakened by a loud knocking at the door. "Open the door," said a voice outside. "I am cold and hungry, and have come far." But mindful of the warning of Partridge, the nymph wife paid no heed to the call. Now the voice was that of a wicked sorcerer who always prowled through the forest and who knew that Partridge was away. He wished to kill and eat the nymph. He was a very clever and sly fellow, and he could imitate the voices of all men and animals to lure people to their death. For a long time after his first call, he was silent. Then he knocked again and imitated the voice of the nymph's brothers and sisters and said, "Oh, sister, we have followed you for a long time, until at last we have found you. Open the door to us." But still the nymph was suspicious and refused to unbar the door. Then the sorcerer imitated her father's voice and called her daughter, but still she would not let him in. At last he talked like her mother and said, "Oh, daughter, open the door. I have come far in search of you, and I am very cold and hungry and tired." The nymph wife was deceived at last, for she thought the voice was that of her old mother from the stream. Hastily she opened the door. At once the wicked sorcerer, the evil spirit of the woods, pounced upon her, and killing her at a blow, he greedily devoured her like a wolf until not a bone was left. The next morning, Partridge came home. He found the door of his house open and his wife absent. He wondered greatly, for he remembered her promise, and he could not believe that she had been killed. So he resolved to use his magic power to learn where she had gone. He took his magic wooden plate and filled it with water and placed it in a corner of the tent while he slept. When he awoke, the dish was full, not of water, but of blood. Then he knew from this sign that his wife had been killed by the sorcerer. He determined to punish her slayer, and taking his axe and his bow and arrows and his magic charm, he left his work and set out in pursuit of the sorcerer. He knew that the sorcerers traveled in pairs. He knew, too, that they had many tricks by which to escape punishment, and that they could take on various shapes. So he went along cautiously. By evening, he reached a great lone land in the far north, where he thought he found traces of two of the evil ones. He came to a large cave, which he entered, intending to pass the night there. From a huge rock at the side of the cave, a man's foot was sticking out. He knew that here was one of the sorcerers who had gone into the rock to sleep, as was their custom, and leaving his foot sticking out so that his comrade could pull him out when he had slept long enough. Partridge quickly cut off the foot close to the rock, and there the sorcerer was left, closed up forever in the stone. There the rock remains to this day. Just as Partridge had finished the cutting, the sorcerer's companion came in, And Partridge knew, for he had seen him often about his tent, that here at last was the murderer of his wife. When the sorcerer saw no foot sticking from the rock, he knew at once that his brother was forever locked up in the stone, and he became very angry. Then he saw Partridge, whom he knew to be his brother's slayer, but giving no sign of this knowledge. He received him kindly. He bolted the door of the cave and then made a great fire, thinking to roast Partridge alive and thereby have a good meal. But Partridge used his magic charm against the heat and helped the sorcerer to pile more wood on the fire, saying that he was very cold. Soon the cave grew hotter and hotter until at last its sides became red and the flame shot high to the roof. And even before he knew it, the sorcerer was overcome by the great heat. Partridge threw him upon the fire, where he was quickly burned to cinders. Then, well pleased with his vengeance, he returned quickly to his home. But from that day, poor Partridge was never himself again. He sorrowed greatly for his dead nymph wife until he became stupid and could not do his work well. But he went faithfully about his duties, finishing the great fleet of boats for the birds and animals. Finally came the day when all were to be launched, and Glooskap and all his people gathered to see the fleet go by. It was a very wonderful sight on a great inland sea. The eagle had a large canoe, which he paddled with the ends of his wings. All the birds of the sea and the river had very wonderful boats. The crane and the duck, the snipe and the curlew, the plover and the gull, the wild goose and the loon, and the kingfisher. And the boats were of all different colors, each color the same as that of the bird for whom the boat was made. All the birds were supplied with boats. Even the hummingbird had a tiny canoe of many wonderful colors, and he had a little paddle not larger than a small pin. Partridge's own canoe was the last to be launched. The people all watched, for in the patience and the eagerness, for they thought that because he had built such wonderful boats for the other birds, he would have a particularly good one for himself. Now, Partridge had built his own canoe last, while he sorrowed for his dead wife. His brain had been muddled by his great grief. He reasoned foolishly that since a boat with two ends could be rowed in two directions, a boat with no ends at all could be rowed in all directions. So he made his own boat round like a saucer. But when it was launched and he tried to paddle it, he made no headway, for it turned round and round and round, but always stayed in one place. All the people and the birds, when they saw it, laughed heartily at him, and they called him a fool. Then poor Partridge's grief had increased. He knew that he had forever lost his reputation as a boat builder among the birds of the sea. He had no wish to dwell longer among them, and he decided to leave them forever. So he flew far away into the forest, and since that time he has never been seen upon the shore of the sea, nor near a river or a lake. He stays on land, far in the deep woods, and he has forgotten even how to fish and how to swim. But he still keeps one remnant of his old life. He still makes a drumming noise as if he is hammering a canoe. And deep in the forest, you can still hear this strange sound. You know then that he is mindful of old times when he built boats upon the shore, and all day long and far into the night tapped lightly with his hammer. The end. That's a pretty good story right there.
Yes, it is.
It was sad but happy but sad.
Yep. If you look at the picture, we talked about those bull barrel boats that they had, round ones, remember, made out of what you call it. So anyway, but anyhow, yeah, good story.
And next week, our story will be the first mosquito. The first mosquito. So that'll be for next week. Yeah, so y'all can look forward to that story next week. Now, I did pull cards earlier this evening, and so we're running on
everybody's
2 hours already, but this shouldn't take long. I've got 6 cards. Wait. Oh, excuse me. 5 cards. 5-card draw. And I checked too at the end to see if there was any other cards, but so last couple of times has been 6 cards, if y'all remember. And I'll refresh your memory. Oh my God! Wait a minute, one of this is wrong.
Well, he says, well, no heads were chopped off. Guy Boy says, good story. Lucky says, great stories. Thank you, Robert and Hawkeye. Everybody's been trying. Go ahead.
This particular book of stories has, that they've been really nice, So thumbs up to what's his name from 1907 or whatever it was. So, but anyway,
different group of Indians.
Yep. Or by that time a collection, because the ones that were written earlier in the late 1800s, they would get one particular chief or somebody to sit down and tell them stories. And then, but later on, it was, the reservations where they'd go out and sit, and there would be representatives from several different tribes whose story of Glooskap was different than the stories of Glooskap by the Cherokee, for example. So, but anyway, but they all had stories about Glooskap, which is interesting. So they all knew who he was, but
that's right.
Out of 5 cards, we got 3 upside down. The first one is frog. The next one is deer. The next one is snake, which is transmutation. The next one upside down is dog, which I believe is, yes, loyalty. And the last one in the cards is number 17, mountain lion, which is leadership. So let me go to frog first. I got to go to the back of the book. Ooh, went right to it. Frog is about cleansing. Frog sings the songs that bring the rain and make the road dirt more bearable. The dirt road more bearable. Frog medicine is akin to water energy, and in the East on the medicine wheel. Frog teaches us to honor our tears, for they cleanse the soul. All water rights belong. There's the frog. He's right there on cue. All water
That's
rights
funny.
belong to frog, including all initiations by water. Water prepares and cleanses the body for sacred ceremony. It is the element we understand best in the womb. Frog, like ourselves, is a polywog in the fetal waters and only learns to hop after it experiences the world of fluidity. An ability of frog medicine people is to give support and energy where it is needed. A frog medicine person can clean negativity from any environment. Now, this frog, it be upside down. Frog slipped in the mud and is lying on its back, unable to right itself. Get ready for more mud in your eye. The contrary position of frog can denote an unwillingness on your part to wipe the mire out of your life. In other words, you'd rather waller in the mud like a hog. Mud can turn from mire to bog to quicksand if you don't recognize its effects on your present situation. Is somebody draining your energy, or are you allowing yourself to ride down the tubes with them? In other words, get involved in something and end up getting broke by yourself. Have you tried to settle someone else's quarrel and gotten in the line of fire? It says, stop it. Swim with frog. Frog's bug eyes see it all. Dive deeply and then hop to the next lily pad to catch some sun. In this way, you may see exactly what is draining your energy. Let me repeat that last little bit. Dive deeply and then next lily pad to catch the sun. In this way, you may see exactly what has been draining your energy. In other words, take one step back and look around, and, soaking in the tub might help, etc. At times, all of life's activities can be overwhelming, and everyone occasionally needs a break. A contrary frog can signal those moments, but can also be a time of feeling waterlogged. In feeling waterlogged, you may be dealing with too many emotions or feelings. This is to say that the world is too much with you, or that you have immersed yourself in one idea or activity to the exclusions of other facets of your life. In this case, a break from routine is suggested. Hop to other lily pads or visit other ponds for a while. So the upside down frog is saying we might don't get caught in the mud mire. Now, deer is innocence. And my dear friend Deer, this is one of my most favorite cards, is upside down. Deer is gentleness. Now, one day, Fawn heard Great Spirit calling to her from the top of Sacred Mountain. And Fawn immediately started up the trail. She didn't know that a horrible demon guarded the way to the Great Spirit's lodge. Demon was trying to keep all the beings of creation, all beings of creation, from connecting with the Great Spirit. He wanted all of Great Spirit's creatures to feel the Great Spirit didn't want to be disturbed. This would make the demon feel powerful and capable of causing them to fear him. And so Fawn went up the trail, met the demon, and the demon tried his best to scare the fawn, and Fawn just smiled and blinked its eyes and won over the demon. Deer teaches us to use the power of gentleness to touch the hearts and minds of wounded beings who are trying to keep themselves and us from Sacred Mountain. Deer in the contrary position indicates that you are courting your own fear. So it ain't some other demon, it's you. By fighting the internal demons of negative ideas. This is a clue to you that force is not always the best method. You may not be willing to love yourself enough to feel your fears and let them go. You may be projecting your fears on others. It may also be others whom you fear, reminding you of a time when you reacted to life in much the same manner. At any rate, love is the key. The only true balance to power is the love and compassion of Deer. Be willing to find things to love about yourself and others, and your demons will melt away. Your fears cannot exist in the same place that love and gentleness abide. I have to read that again. Your fears cannot exist in the same place where love and gentleness abide. If there's a room full of love, fear ain't got a chance, right? So you've got Frog that says you need to take a step back and look at stuff. And Deer is telling you that, to try not to force your way through things, but that maybe the answer is gentleness and kindness. And now we're going to go to the snake clan, which is number 6, transmutation. Snakes medicine people are very rare. Their initiation involves experiencing and living through multiple snake bites, which allows them to transmute all poisons, be they mental, physical, spiritual, or emotional. The transmutation of the life, death, rebirth cycle is exemplified by the shedding of snake skin. It is the energy of wholeness, cosmic consciousness, and the ability to experience anything willingly and without resistance. It is the knowledge that all things are equal in creation. All things are equal in creation. This medicine teaches you on a personal level that you are a universal being. So here we got Frog saying, cleanse yourself and take a step back and look at the situation. Don't get bogged in the mire. Deer is saying, that gentleness is possibly required in, situations at present or during this time. And Snake is trying to say that, there's transmutation involved. Through accepting all aspects of your life, you can bring about the transmutation of the fire medicine. So you can transmutate, in other words, you can shed this skin which is at the beginning of the year with all this stuff that's going on with everybody and Doge and all this stuff. Maybe we need to peel, the last year or the last century off of ourselves and get into the future. Now, I dropped the snake card, and I'm not sure if it was upside down or not, but I want to read the contrary. You may have chosen to mask your ability to change. So snake is about change and transmutation. And deer saying don't force it, and frog saying step back and look at it before you do it. you know, Look at the idea that you may fear changing your present state of affairs because this may entail a short passage into discomfort. If you're shedding your skin after a sunburn, it hurts for a little while. So just be mindful of that. Feel snake's rhythm and you will dance freely, incorporating those transmutating forces of the universe as part of your sensual dance of power. So shaking a little loose is not a bad thing. Now the next one is dog, which is loyalty. But dog is upside down here in this case. Dog has been considered the servant of humanity throughout history. If a person carries dog medicine, he or she is usually serving others or humanity in some way. Dog was the servant soldier that guarded the tribe's lodges from surprise attack. Dog is a medicine that embodies the loving gentleness of best friend. Now, gentleness, and deer was talked about gentleness, right? So let me go back. But dog's upside down. In the contrary position, dog may be telling you that you have become critical or mean due to the company you are keeping. Now, you can also become mean because of a situation. So these new things that are coming out from Trump and company have made some people really mean, all right? And so the reversal of this medicine could also imply that it is time to stop cowering in fear, which is interesting because a lot of folks are starting to talk about stuff, and Joy Reid's been canceled. And, maybe it's okay to come out of the closet and just start talking about stuff where all of us were scared before. Times have changed. The key is to realize that these are not external enemies, but sometimes thought forms in your own mind, which tell you that you are not worthy of loyalty. And see, we've been told for the last 4 years, ain't none of us any good. It's time to come out of that. Do you, for example, pass on gossip or or something else and is rumor mongering? These are characteristics of fear, and particularly of a fear that is common to the human two-legged family. The fear of not belonging or of not being approved of. Reclaim the power of loyalty to yourself and to your self-truths. Become like dog and be your own best friend. So that's good. Number 17 is mountain lion, and that was right side up. So these cards, even though they're upside down, I'm not getting a negative vibe out of the cards. And Mountain Lion is leadership, and it's right side up, so that should be encouraging after these cards. Mountain Lion can be a very difficult power totem because it places you in a position to be a target for the problems of others. You could be blamed for things going wrong or for always taking charge when others cannot. You could become a perfect justification for the insecurities of others. Now, y'all know that I've been talking for a while, that I said that um, our jobs for many of us in the future is going to be to try to explain to some of these normies and others what's really going on and what the truth really is. And it looks like it's our time, right? Mountain Lion medicine involves lessons on the use of power in leadership. It is the ability to lead without insisting that others follow. It is the understanding that all beings are potential leaders in their own ways. The use and abuse of power in a position of influence are part of this great cat's medicine. And it's also problems that are going on right now in the universe. If Mountain Lion has come to you, it is time to stand on your convictions and lead yourself where your heart takes you. If you pulled the card, you may be asked to review the purpose behind your own personal beliefs. They want me to read that one again. You may be asked to review the purpose behind your own personal beliefs. Why do you believe in this? Why do you believe in that? Why do you believe the moon is round? Or why do you believe that, just whatever? Why do you believe what you believe? And it's not to like criticize yourself. It's that what you believe, like some of the lies have been told the last 4 years, what you believe now may not really be the truth. So you need to look at it and go, is this really the truth? So you may need to discover whether or not your plans of life include a pride of cubs, or, if you're willing to be a leader. Maybe you already are. The question may be whether or not the time has come to push the cubs out of the cave, so to speak. If you are aligned with cat medicine, you are considered to be king of the mountain and never allowed to be human or vulnerable. The pitfalls are many, but the rewards are great. So Mountain Lion is about leadership. So can you take what you know and can you show people the way without insisting that they follow you or someone else? It'd be like, hey man, you and one of the things that bugs me with these Bible thumpers is that you got to follow Jesus, and they push it on you. You got to follow. You got to be there. You got to do. And it's like, for me, it's like, you can suggest that I follow Jesus, but what if I'm a devout Muslim? I'm sorry, but Muhammad's got something for me. But so the pressure of people trying to, even though they think it's a good idea, and even though it might be a good idea, the pushing of things does not go well. So be careful in that. But at the same time, be willing, as Mountain Lion says, be willing to look at what you believe in and find out if that's really what you believe. Why do you believe that? Because you just might be wrong. You may need to reassess your situation. And Snake is telling us to transmutate. We got to change. We got to drop the skin of our old stuff. And Dog is telling us, or are you sure that we're being loyal to something that really doesn't, we shouldn't be loyal to, But anyway, so there's your card reading for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. It's a positive one, in my opinion, because the end card is leadership. Uh-oh.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I'm back.
I'm back. So we ran along a little long in the tooth tonight, but
That's all right. Every now and then.
yeah, we don't do it often. We usually keep it to 2 hours. So, we started a little late, so we're not far off our 2-hour mark.
No, I got 2 hours and 15 minutes, so we're close. So, well, you got a show tonight?
I'm going to try. I'm sleepy. So if I can stay awake,
Yeah, me, I got to get to bed. I was still listening, and I'm like dozing off a little bit. Oh yeah. Not that but I've been up for a long time. Got a hard day at work. Take your vitamins, Chloe says. Yeah.
Yep.
I will.
Yeah, take my medicine. Yeah, I got it. That's
all right.
I'm just sitting there thinking, Chloe's going to tell me to take my meds.
That's right. There you go.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging out with us again on this Tuesday night. And I'm so glad we could come back because last week, Mr. Robert was, in the freezing cold. So I thank you. We thank you and hope you have a great week. And I hope to see you next week.
Yes, next week we'll be back with another great show. And don't forget to join me on Saturday night, where I have no idea who's going to be the guest. But anyway, we'll get there. It'll all be fun. Chloe's grateful. Thank you, Scotty Boy, Chloe, Elderberry, all of you that stuck around. John Price, Nina the Mystic, everybody who came tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and everybody in the future. Susie Q, she's in the background listening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. The show wouldn't be a show if we didn't have wonderful people like you listening to us. Remember, go out and do something nice for somebody else. That'll make my day. And I will too. Pass around the goodness. That's what I say.
Yep.
Just keep it going. Keep it flowing. Karma will come back, and so will good karma come back in a better way. With that, everybody, go out and be that frequency you want to receive, everyone. Love you all. Peace, everybody.